Hi everybody, this is an English literature Macbeth revision video. I'm going to focus on the witches today and how Shakespeare uses the witches as a device to embed different themes within Macbeth. Now, it's worth pointing out, I have covered the witches in quite a lot of detail in the previous two videos that I've uploaded. So it would be a really good idea to watch the Macbeth character video as well as the plot summary. Like I said, I've covered the witches in depth really in those two other videos, but the purpose of this video is to probably just touch upon some of the things that I have already spoken about, but also looking at a little bit of a religious viewpoint from people of the Jacobsen era and how that may link to the supernatural and supernatural beliefs. So again, one thing that I could suggest to you, which would be a really good strategy whilst watching this video, is to produce some revision cards. You can stop and start the slides whenever you want. I have actually put some little tasks on some of the slides, but I will talk you through those tasks and you can pretty much just stop it and start it whenever you like. So this is kind of just, I suppose, like a little add-on video with some subject knowledge about the witches. Okay, so the first thing that I want to talk to you through is this slide, and this involves a little timeline, and the purpose of this timeline is to talk about the discovery of witchcraft. So we are interested in about 1590 onwards, and we are interested in King James and his view on witchcraft. That was when Macbeth, sorry, not Macbeth, sorry, that was when Shakespeare wrote Macbeth, when King James was on the throne. So you've got a playwright that is, you know, including things within his play that may sort of impress or entertain a king, King James, and his views. Okay, so we're going to talk about James and how he specifically links to the theme of supernatural on the next slide. Okay, so in 1950, James I had heard that there were witches in North Berwick who were plotting to kill him through a witchcraft curse, apparently. So reports said that they had thrown cats and bits of dead human bodies into the North Sea as they were sailing across it. This raised a storm which almost wrecked James's ship. So this is a story that's been reported, and it's been sort of reported and linked to James and his beliefs. Okay, but we see these little supernatural elements crop up in Macbeth, and these are what specifically sort of what James specifically, you know, experienced or was said to have experienced, depending on your own beliefs. The reference to the cats and the storms, we often see Shakespeare using those within Macbeth, particularly in Act 1, the sort of symbolism of the cat. We'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. So he survived, and he heard of the plot and sent for the witches, and he questioned their leaders. Agnes Sampson apparently was the leader, the witch. And to his amazement, Agnes Sampson repeated some of the wife Anne on the night of his wedding, and it's rumoured to sort of to have been established that no one could possibly have heard those words apart from James and Anne themselves. So sort of this is sort of rumoured to be part of James's beliefs, you know, and in the supernatural. The reason why James believed he survived was because he was a rightful king and he was protected by God, which you will know as the divine right of kings. You've studied this a lot in lessons. You know, it was down to God to determine who would be king, and James was the rightful heir to the throne. So he believed that he was protected. So Shakespeare took these ideas, the rightful kingships and witchcraft and the divine right of kings, and he produced a play, Macbeth. So just stepping into the shoes of a Jacobean era, people would have genuinely have believed that witches existed, mainly, down to religion, but also they've got this influential king that has these strong beliefs. So, witchcraft and the supernatural formed part of the everyday norm. So sometimes we sort of think, oh, it's a bit silly, as if witches existed, but we need to step back into shoes that were over 500 years ago, and sort of get on board with the audience during that time period. So they would have believed that witches could talk to the dead. They believed that witches could see into the future. They could make people ill by using spells and potions. Witches could fly and make themselves invisible. Witches used animals such as cats as disguises for the evil spirits who served them. And witches could cause bad weather and storms, mainly affecting ships and spoiling crops. So just moving on to the next slide. It's Act 1, Scene 1, Thunder, Lightning, and Enter the Witches. When shall we three meet again, in thunder, lightning, or in rain? When the Hailey-Bailey's done, when the battle's lost and won. That will be ere the set of the sun, where the place upon the heath, there to meet Macbeth. I come, grey Malkin. The paddock calls, and then they all close that scene by chanting together. They've all individually spoke, but they are now chanting together. Fair is foul, and foul is fair. Hover through the fog and the filthy air. So just looking at the sort of the witches' familiars, grey Malkin, grey cat. So going back to this slide, particularly looking at the point where it says the witches using animals such as cats as disguises for evil spirits, we're actually seeing that within Act 1, Scene 1 of Macbeth, and obviously the link that we have to James and his ship. It's all really, really interesting. Another point that I want to cover, with the Jacobean beliefs, that the witches could cause bad weather and storms. So actually, going back to the stage directions at the top, the thunder and lightning, enter the three witches. So actually, we're seeing that viewpoint there, the bad weather and the storms. So that not just being a method of creating fear, but also, is a method of pathetic fallacy. It's setting the tone for the remainder of the play. It's a stage direction that Shakespeare specifically, decided that he was going to use. The first scene of Macbeth isn't opened with Macbeth, it's opened with the witches. So I suppose in any question that you get in your exam, you probably need to be aware of that and, explaining that. Obviously depends on what question you get, but I should imagine there's a fairly good chance that, you got that opportunity to explain, Shakespeare didn't choose to open the play with Macbeth. It's actually opened by the witches and the supernatural to set the tone, to set the purpose, to back up these beliefs of a Jacobean audience. You can almost imagine a Jacobean person would have gone to watch this play be performed on a stage. And if they have these religious beliefs before they've even watched this play, and they're seeing this play opened by the witches, they would have been absolutely terrified. So that's something that we always need to consider, and always remember that impact on the audience. It is a play, it's designed to be performed on a stage. Okay. Just want to go back to that first slide and the image of the witches. I chose that image because I found it to be quite interesting. To me, that is the traditional or stereotypical way that we would see or imagine a witch. So every time I read Macbeth, I imagine the witches to resemble something like this. But it's also important that we understand that there are different interpretations of the witches. with every different adaptation of the play that has ever been produced and performed. But yes, I imagine The Witches to be like this every time I read Macbeth. Okay, so that's an example of, again, the use of the supernatural in those views. So something that you could do here, a really good task would be to maybe have a look through the play and to decide what other evidence is there to suggest that Macbeth is in fact bewitched. So one thing that you need to think about is, how his character is developing. He's sort of really reliant on the witches and what they've told him. He's reliant on what the witches told him to determine his future. And he often goes to the witches, we see it, for some kind of reassurance. So I want you to go back and maybe look through towards the middle and maybe towards the end of the play and think about, how it is the fact that he could be perhaps spellbound or bewitched or cursed. How is that shown through specific examples? Moving on to the next slide. So again, Elizabethans and Jacobeans, people that lived in the Jacobean and Elizabethan society, that's what that means. They believed that there were 4 symptoms of demonic possessions. So hallucinations. We see hallucinations a lot in Macbeth. We see Banquo's ghost at the banquet sitting in Macbeth's throne. We see the hallucinations of the dagger. We see the hallucinations of the blood-stained hands. Okay. The inability to pray. Again, it might be worth interesting. When Lady Macbeth is sleepwalking, when she's talking to her doctor and her nurse, she's not actually praying to a god. She's talking to the supernatural spirits. Might be worth investigating as to whether Macbeth also does this. And again, you've got the trance. So a good example of this is Lady Macbeth when she is talking to herself. She's sleepwalking. She's unable to be woken. She's saying things out loud, and she doesn't know that obviously she's in a state of trance. That she is saying things out loud. The invocation to possession. That's a tricky one to say, first of all. That means taking on a totally different personality. So a massive personality change as if a person has been possessed. So I think we definitely see that in Macbeth, don't we? When he's being described as the brave and valiant Macbeth, and then at the end of the plays, he's actually described as a tyrant. But his personality completely transforms. Okay, and again, I suppose this links back to these beliefs that we've spoken about. Again, witches could make people fall ill by using spells and potions. So we definitely see that, and I think we've got an argument for both the characters of Lady Macbeth and Macbeth. So if you want to explore these 4 symptoms of demonic possession in a bit more detail, would be really, really good. I've done the first one for you. So what you need to do is to find evidence within the play, and then a little bit of an explanation in the far column. Why is that significant? Okay, so have a go at that. You could perhaps, do a revision card for each symptom, and if we can maybe fit that in dependent on our exam question, that would be impressive. So feel free to stop and start the video now to create a revision card. Okay, this next slide. Now I've chosen this because I feel it is a key scene. I mean, there are so many key scenes in Macbeth, but I've decided to focus on this one in particular. So, Act 1, Scene 3. In this scene, we meet Macbeth for the first time. The witches gather on the moor and cast a spell as Macbeth and Banquo arrive. The witches hail Macbeth first by his title Thane of Glamis, then as Thane of Cawdor, and then finally as king. They then prophesy that Banquo's children will become kings, and Macbeth demands to know more, but the witches just vanish. Ross and Angus arrive and tell Macbeth that he's been given the title Thane of Cawdor. So you can look at this scene here. I've hyperlinked it. So you can click and actually view the scene on there. And then use the following steps. Remember to look at it line by line. Okay, if you're looking at it for the first time, which I don't think you should be, but don't worry if you don't quite get everything all at once. So look at the scene. Who has the most lines? Are they using verse or prose? Actors at the Royal Shakespeare Company, that's what that means, often put language in their own words to help them understand what they are saying. So there's some definitions that have been hyperlinked on that adaptation to help you simplify, to help the scene become more simplified. And again, there's some little hyperlinks where you can click on the text that's been highlighted for extra guidance. Also, read the scene aloud and listen to the voice recording. Now, I have been quite brave. I have recorded this scene myself, so I've sort of read it out loud to you. I'll just play a little bit of a section of that. All you need to do is to just make sure that you are clicking on that little icon. It's about 6 minutes long, that clip. But if you feel that you learn better, or knowledge is absorbed more when people are reading and explaining to you, then feel free to use that little symbol there. And again, watch the video. Okay, so there's a little hyperlink, and it gives you, it's sort of a modern day adaptation, this, so it may help you understand and sort of come to grips with different adaptations. So yeah, that's just a little bit of a preview of the video. So obviously it's not, it's a modern day interpretation. It's not a traditional Jacobean version, but it's a very good one. So again, think about how characters are coming across in that. Think about the witches. I think they're in the form of children in this one, which is interesting. But think about how Banquo and how Macbeth are acting and how the different characters are coming across. This is an adaptation that was performed by the Royal Shakespeare Company. So I just thought I'd add this on as a little bit of a sort of different way of looking at things. But yeah, feel free to skip that slide if you're not really interested in looking at that modern day adaptation. So the next slide, again, it's a little bit more about how religion links to the supernatural. So almost everyone in England in Shakespeare's day was Christian. Everyone would go to church on a Sunday, or even more often. Most people believed in hell as a very real place and that the devil was a specific person. Queen Elizabeth I's father, Henry, broke away from the Catholic Church in Rome and became head of the Church of England. Across Northern Europe at this time, groups of people protested against the Roman Catholic Church, and they were known as the Protestants. They did not obey the Pope. So in England, people were martyred on both sides. They were often burnt at the stake. So there is an interpretation that the witches could be representative of the Holy Trinity, of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Okay, three witches prophesies who Macbeth will become, much like the prophets in the Bible prophesies about Jesus. Again, a quote to back that up is, "Thou hast it now, King Cawdor Glamis, all as the weird women promised." And Banquo says that in Act 3, Scene 1. So again, could be something to perhaps put on a revision card. Might be interesting to include that in your exam if you have the opportunity to do so. And again, I think if you are aiming for those grades, 5, 6, 7s, 8s, 9s, it's definitely worth putting that extra work in, and sort of trying to think of a different way of approaching things, and perhaps maybe bringing more than one suggestion or interpretation to a point. So I've just put some key questions that I think I would find difficult to answer, actually. So again, you could perhaps do a little thought bubble mind map, or even actually write a response to those questions, and feel free to send them to your English teachers or directly to me. I would love to look through some of your work and your ideas. So yes, that is the Witches character analysis. So make sure that you are looking back at the other videos as well. This sort of analysis forms a wider part of the other videos that I have spoken about the witches in. So please subscribe to our channel. There will be more content being posted on the run up to your exams in the not too distant future. Thank you for listening, and I hope you found it useful.